Hey guys, I just want to go through the goals again. Remember, what we want to do is we want to visually map in a simplified way all the reading which we've done. Then we're going to read the extracts to get the much deeper stuff. Parrot, that would be the example. We're going to look at how we actually individuate to the point where we can understand what personal identity is. And then we want to identify what the principle of individuation is for a person. And then explore any kind of moral issues that might surround the definition or the principle of individuation for a person. Okay, so just keep in mind that these are the things we want to achieve over the chunks of readings that we do, and I want to do them in short chunks so that they don't become too burdensome. Alright, that's the idea. Now, what we're doing now is reading 14 and 15, and I want to point out that we're still on this idea of substance and what consciousness is and how do we know what a person is based on exploring the nature of conscious. So let's start doing that. As to the second part of the question of whether the same immaterial substance remaining, there may be two distinct persons, which question seems to me to be built on this: whether the same immaterial being conscious of the action of its past duration, may be wholly stripped of all consciousness of its past experience and lose it beyond the power of ever retrieving it again. So in other words, same immaterial substance, which is the soul, going from person A to person B. If you have all your memories stripped away, what happens? Alright, and so, as it were, beginning a new account from a new period, have a consciousness that cannot reach beyond that new account or the new state. You get it? So consciousness can't move further past the awareness of the time it inhabited the new body. All those who hold pre-existence evidently of this mind, all those who hold pre-existence are evidently of this mind, since they allow the soul to have no remaining consciousness of what it did in that pre-existent state, either of wholly separate from body or informing any other body. And if they should not, it is plain experience would be against them. So let's read that a little bit again where I got a bit lost. Either the soul to have no remaining consciousness of what it did in that pre-existent state. That makes sense. Pre-existing body, either wholly separate from body or informing any other body. So it would have no understanding of it separate from body or informing any other body as well. And if they should not, it is plain experience would be against them. So I'm just basically saying, if they don't have this pre-existence or that kind of assumption, which means by pre-existence are evidently of this mind, that if you that another body, that these three conditions exist or stay out there, well, guess what? Experience is pretty much against you, because I don't really remember what it was like in a past life. You get it? So the personal identity reaching no further than consciousness reaches, a pre-existent spirit not having continued so many ages in that state of silence, must needs make different persons. In other words, what he's saying is basically, if you were a pre-existent spirit not continued so many ages in a state of silence, going from body to body, you must need to generate a new person every time you start that new set of memories that belong to that one body, one person. Suppose a Christian Platonist or a Pythagorean should, upon God's having ended all his works of creation the seventh day, think his soul have existed ever since, and would imagine it as revolved in several human bodies. So it's gone from one body to another body and it's reincarnated. As I once met with one, so he's met someone who's done that, who was persuaded that his had been the soul of Socrates. How reasonably I will not dispute. This I know, that in the post he filled, which was no inconsiderable one, so in other words, he was in a pretty high position, he passed for a very rational man, and the press has shown that he wanted no parts or learning. Don't know what that last little bit means. Would anyone day that he, being not conscious of any of Socrates' actions or thoughts, could be the same person with Socrates? So basically, if a person argues that he is the reincarnation of Socrates, he still isn't Socrates, because his consciousness doesn't extend back to that past life. Let anyone reflect upon himself and conclude that he has in himself an immaterial spirit. So let anyone make this a conclusion. He doesn't necessarily admit it, but just say, let's say, for example, that we do have an immaterial spirit within us, which is that which thinks in him. So again, this is where we refer to the nous. The spirit has the component for thinking, and in the constant change of his body keeps him the same. So this spirit is where his sameness is kept, and is that which he calls himself. So we're calling ourselves what we are, based on the spirit, not on the body. Let him also suppose it to be the same soul that was Nestor or Thersites at the siege of Troy. So read the Iliad. For souls being, as far as we know anything of them in their nature, indifferent to any parcel of matter, the supposition has no apparent absurdity in it. For me, so he's basically saying, well, it's not absurd to say I was Nestor, because basically souls really don't care what body they wake up in, okay? Which it may have been, as well as it is now, the soul of any other man, but he now, having no consciousness of any of the actions of either Nestor or Thersites, does or can he conceive of himself as the same person with either of them? And obviously the answer is no. So obviously this immaterial spirit, which could be the soul, remember that's where the nous is kept, but the immaterial substance of which you're supposed to be in, that can't obviously be the object that contains the self. The self has to be something a bit different from that. It has to be somewhere else. We have to look for it some other place. Can he be concerned in either of their actions, attribute them to himself? No, he can't. Or think them his own more than the actions of any other man that ever existed? Of course not, because he doesn't have, even though his soul might not have been in any other man, the same goes for the man that his soul was in. Obviously he has no awareness of their thoughts, feelings, or actions, or their state of consciousness. So that this consciousness not reaching to any of the other actions either of those men, he has no more oneself with either of them. So in other words, he doesn't actually have oneself combined over those three different bodies or those three different persons. Then if his soul or immaterial spirit, so saying could be immaterial spirit or soul, whatever, that now informs him had been created and began to exist when it began to inform his present body, though it were never so true that the same spirit that informed Nestor's or Thersites' body were numerically the same that now informs his. So, Nestor's spirit, or Nestor's self, couldn't really inform him, even though the soul may have reincarnated. That's a good concept to consider. Also, it's virtually impossible and stupid to say that we could conclude that we are one and the same person, even though the souls might have been the same. Okay, and this goes for soul or immaterial spirit as it goes into different bodies. For this would no more make him the same person with Nestor than if some of the particles of matter that were once part of Nestor were now part of him. Makes sense. The same immaterial substance without the same consciousness, no more making the same person by being united to any body than some particles of matter without consciousness united to any body makes the same person. So in other words, he's saying, let's reject this idea of substance completely. We are not the extra particles that came into us and then left. We are not the substance that changed. We are not the same substance that obviously had a completely different conception of self from one body to another body. That's just ridiculous. All right. So it's just pinning that onto a matter analogy or a particle analogy. But let him once find himself conscious of any of the actions of Nestor, then he finds himself to be the same person with Nestor, and that makes complete sense. If you were to wake up and you were to all of a sudden have all of Nestor's memories, and more importantly, they weren't second-hand accounts, so you honestly believe that you were the person experiencing those memories, the subject of those memories, then you would obviously be Nestor plus whatever you are today, okay? 15. And thus we may be able without any difficulty to conceive that the same person at the same resurrection, though in a body not exactly in make or parts, which he had here, the same consciousness going along with the soul that inhabits it. Let me read this again because I think I read that a bit too quickly. And thus we may be able without any difficulty to conceive, or to come up with the concept, of the same person at the resurrection, though in a body not exactly in make or parts, the same which he had here, the same consciousness going along with the soul that inhabits it. So in other words, in this case with Nestor, I think that's what we're saying. If Nestor's memories and consciousness transferred into the new body, but the soul kind of transferred it, bang, well, it's easy to conceive that that could happen. It's a thought experiment maybe we want to explore, okay? But here he has something to say about soul. But yet soul alone in the change of bodies would scarce to anyone but to him that makes the soul the man be enough to make the same man. So in other words, he's saying, I don't think soul is really where the personal identity is at. For should the soul of a prince carrying with it the consciousness of the prince's past life enter into the form of a cobbler, or into the body of a cobbler, so let's go over this again. So should the soul of a prince carrying with it the consciousness of the prince's past life, so let's say that's Nestor, enter in form the body of a cobbler, so it goes from the prince's past life, right? So the soul of the prince is going into the form of the cobbler. As soon as the cobbler was deserted by his own soul, everyone sees that he would be the same person as with the prince, which makes sense. So, bang, let's go through the thought scenario. Let's say the prince was Nestor. Nestor's soul transfers all conscious and memories to the prince. The prince lives for a bit and then gets transferred into the cobbler, and the cobbler's soul leaves. When with it, the consciousness of the prince transfers into the cobbler, most people would say that's the prince, right? And he would be accountable only for the prince's actions, but who would say it was the same man? Nobody would say it's the same man. So we're getting a different principle of individuation here, right? The body goes to the making of the man. So the body, or the biological organism that maintains the continuity to preserve life, is where we have man. We've got 2 points of individuation here. The first one being defined at this point is what a man is. So the body goes to the making of the man, and would, I guess, to everybody determine the man in this case, wherein the soul, with all of its princely thoughts about it, would not make another man. Of course not. But he would be the same cobbler to everyone besides himself. Yep, I know that in the ordinary way of speaking, the same person and the same man stand for one and the same thing. So in everyday language, we usually use the two interchangeably. And indeed, everyone will always have a liberty to speak as he pleases and to apply what articulate sounds to what ideas he thinks fit and change them as often as he pleases. But yet, when we will inquire what makes the same spirit, man or person, we must fix the ideas of spirit, man or person in our minds, and having resolved with ourselves what we mean by them, it will not be hard to determine in either of them, or the like, when it is the same or when it is not. So what he's saying is, I need a proper definition of man, soul, spirit, and person. We've got to get a proper definition of this because we've been speaking about it too vaguely. Alright, so what you need to do really is you need to probably go back and rewatch this and take some notes. I've deliberately gone through it quickly because I'm trying not to make the reading too burdensome. Just make sure you watch these and make sure you answer the exam-like question that refers to it. Cheers. Thank you.